So a couple weeks ago, we started this series on called Beginning and Ending. So we're looking at Genesis 1 and 2 and some 3 and then Revelation 21 and 22. And here's why. Listen, if we don't get the beginning of the story right, if we don't get it down, when the Bible unfolds, we're just going to be missing it. There are so many things that are foundational to our faith and the way we live our lives, so we want to become the kind of Christians that can act instinctually because we're grounded in the Word. We understand the Word. We know what the Word's about, and even without thinking it, we can be living out our lives this way. And so today we're going to be addressing the question. I want to say the question we're addressing is what in the world are we doing here? Why are we here? So I want to say it's a question that only we can answer, or at least only we can answer well. And I what I want to offer an evidence to you how poorly the rest of the world is answering that question. What in the world are we doing here? By having you notice. Just like the condition of people around us. So in the very extreme, the number of people that take their own lives. And listen, I know there's mental disease and things like that, but the only reason you would take your life in the end was you wouldn't understand what your life was here for to begin with. Think about how rampant depression is. And I don't mean clinical depression that needs to be treated by a doctor or anything like that. I just mean this general pall that seems to be over people, almost all the time. We feel down, we feel despairing, and we don't even know why. And I want to suggest that a good part of why is because we don't get what it is that we're doing here. Why are we even here to begin with? When you look at, again, the culture that we live in, and maybe Western culture in general, this rampant hedonism, the pleasure seeking, pleasure, we live for the weekend kind of thought. What else would we be here for? Because that's all there is to go for. Or even this search for power and to gain power through violent means. We're just grabbing. And I think the reason that people are grabbing the way they do, again, is because we don't get why we're here. And I want to suggest to you that the Bible starts right at the front end, telling us this is why we're here. And so this week and next week, I want to talk to you about the image of God, and specifically what it means to be human. What it means to be human. So what it means to be human will answer the question about why we're here. And so here's the thing. Here's what's awesome about Genesis 1. So in the cultural atmosphere in which it was written, they had no idea what it meant to be human. They knew what images were because they had a cajillion images, but they didn't understand what it meant to be human, or at least their answer to the question, what does it mean to be human? Their answer to the question, why are we here, is an oppressive answer that Genesis 1 answers. So what I want us to do is, are you with me so far? Yeah? At least you know where we're trying to go. And maybe you can get there with me. All right, so I want you to open your Bibles to Genesis 1 or get out your message notes. Look, the reason message notes are in there is just so you can track with us. If you don't want to fill in the blanks, you don't need to fill in the blanks, but at least you can track with us. So if you have your Bibles open, you'll be able to mark some things, and we're going to be putting the passages up on the screen. Way to go, Matthew, as you can already see. And we're taking off a big chunk, but it's important to see everything that happens before God says, let us make humans after our own image. It's important to see everything that happens before so we can see what's going on when God says that. All right, so you with me? Here we go. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God, and we talked about this last week, a wind from God, the breath of God, the Spirit of God, it's all, yeah. I just don't want you to be nervous. Like a wind from God, this is the breath, the Spirit of God, swept over the face of the waters. And we talked about the waters last week. The waters are this chaos. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day. He gave it a name. He called the light day, and the darkness, he gave it a name. He called it night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So what has God just created? In that first day, what did God create? And I know we jump right away and we say, well, he created light. Let there be light, and there was light. But that's only the first step of it. Like, he creates light, and he calls it day. And he separates it from the darkness, which he called night. See, what God has created here is time. Time. Like day and night, are these not the most basic measures of time? Now, this will be important later on, because you know what it says in Revelation? I'll just tell you now. In Revelation 22, it says, okay, there's no more night. What does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things, but at the very least, it means it's like, oh, we don't have day and night anymore. We just have day. We don't have time. We're timeless in Revelation 22, which is eternity, right? There is no day and night. There is no beginning. There's just day. There's no night. So when we get to Revelation 22, we're done with time. But here in Genesis 1, time. That's God's first act of creation, and that's your first fill-in as well. That fits nicely. All right, verse 6. And God said, so this is what we talked about all last week. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so, and God called the dome sky. God gives things names for a reason. Names are always about purpose and function. That's going to be key words all morning here. So God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. So we have another day, another act of ordering, separating the waters, sky. All right, verse 9. And God said, again, we're separating and ordering. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation." I've got that underlined, highlighted in my notes. Let the earth bring forth vegetation. God is giving instruction to the land. This land, this is what I want you to do. I want you to put forth vegetation. Plants yielding seed, fruit trees of every kind, and it was so. Verse 12. And the earth did what God instructed. It's interesting to note that in all the things that were ever created, we're the only ones that didn't do what we were instructed to do. Everything else did what it was supposed to do. The land put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, trees of every kind, bearing fruit with a seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. So, you see what God's been doing here in these first 3 days? This is your second fill-in, I think. God creates space. First, he creates time. Day 1, he creates time. Day 2, he creates space. The sky, the land, the seas. These are all habitations. These are all habitats. And just right at the end, he begins to hint at what he's going to do next. So first he creates space. I don't mean outer space, but I mean spaces, habitats. the time, space, sky, seas, land. So the next thing God's doing then is filling the habitats, and giving instruction to the land. Land, like, here's your purpose, here's your function. Your function is to bring forth vegetation. And it functions just like God designed it, just as he instructed. And that's what it means when it says it was good. Hold on to that, but that's what it means. So you see what God's doing here is he creates time, he creates space, and then the third thing he's doing here is he fills space. He fills the space that he created. First habitats, then inhabitants. Okay? So, verse 14, we're seeing how this works out. In verse 14, God says, let there be lights. Okay? He's filling the space. Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let the lights be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. I wish we could talk about that, but we can't. Verse 15, let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. Now, it doesn't use the word sun and moon. I think we're pretty safe to assume sun and moon, but don't miss what's really fascinating here. The greater light is to rule the day. Rule. Wow, what's he mean by that? And the lesser light to rule the night. And then the stars. In verse 17, God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over there, to give the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, there was morning, the fourth day. So what we see in day 4 is that what was hinted at in the third day becomes very explicit in the fourth day. That is to say, God filling his habitat and giving function and even giving authority to what he creates. He fills the sky dome that he created on the second day with the sun and the moon and the stars, and he gives them their function, rule over the day and rule over the night. And he gives them function and purpose and even authority to fulfill that function, rule over. Okay, so this is, I'm just pointing that out to you because this is a theme. And this is going to come through for us. So verse 20. And God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures. Okay, so just like God spoke to the land, like let the land bring forth vegetation, he speaks to the seas in the same way. Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures. I love that word, swarms, like just swarms of life. Like God, who is life, just unleashes life on his creation. Swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth and across the dome. So God created the great sea monsters. Like, okay. I think that's just to help them know that sea monsters are okay because God created them. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind and which the waters swarm and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, he's giving them instructions, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Multiply. That's what you say to birds. Multiply, but everything. Multiply. Fill the waters in the seas and let the birds, there it is again, multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning. Fifth day. Time to fill up the seas. Time to fill up the sky with living creatures. And so God gives them that instruction. Multiply, fill, like he's letting life loose. It's kind of like this is soccer season, and it's where some of us are going like right after church. And so it's like God is like a parent talking to his children like, go. Get out there on the soccer field. Run, kick, play, go. Or it's like a parent talking to an older kid, like, go. Get out of the house and make a life of your own. But like, go. This is what God's doing. It's like, go, do your thing, God says. Like, and not your own thing, but do the thing I created you to do. Do the functions and the purpose with which I created you. I'm empowering you to do that. God is giving away power. That's a fill-in somewhere or another. He's not losing power, but he's giving away power. He's giving power. He's given authority to the things that he's created. He's saying, I set you free to multiply and fill, function and purpose. And it was good. It was good. Meaning, every time God says it was good, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, every time God says it was good, it's about this idea of purpose and function. Okay, so like think about a time when maybe you buy something or maybe you make something and you're rather dissatisfied with it. Maybe it doesn't work. Doesn't do what you wanted it to do. Or maybe somebody gives you a present and you don't even know what it is. It's like, oh, that's really nice. But you don't know what to do. Grandfathers are really good at this. Like ask Bethany, she can tell you, I don't know what to do with this gift. And so in any of those instances, you might end up saying something like this. This is no good for anything. Right? This is no good for anything. And when we say that, we're looking at an object that it seems to have no purpose or function. It's no good for anything. No good. No good. Because it has no purpose or function. All these things that God makes, it's good. Why is it good? Because it has purpose and it has function. Are you with me? We're almost getting to the key point. Verse 24. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures. Okay, so first the land is bringing forth vegetation. Now it's even more spectacular than that. Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so. And God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And again, God saw that it was good. So like on the 5th day, the waters were told to bring forth life. On the 6th day, the land was told to bring forth life. Like God is telling his creation what to do, why he created it. Function this way, he says. Function this way. And then he unleashes them to do what it was he created them to do. All right, so again, God determines, creates everything with function and purpose, and then empowers them to actually do what he created them to do. All right, so verse 26. The climax of this first chapter. Well, not really, but it is for today. The climax is even better than this. Then God said, let us make humans in our image. Now, we take that for granted, but the first readers of this, and anybody else that would have gotten a hold of this in the surrounding cultures would have had to do a double take. What? Let's make humans, let's make humanity in our image, according to our likeness, and let them, who? Humans, like all of humanity, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And so God created humanity. God created the humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, here, they're getting instructions too. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Okay, so far, the same instructions that the animals got, be fruitful, multiply, fill, because I want my space filled. I want my habitats filled with inhabitants. So fill. But then he says, fill the land and subdue it. Subdue it. God is always about bringing order to the chaos. I don't want the land to grow wild. I want you to bring order to the land. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the ground. So like in this ancient Near Eastern culture where the Hebrews are coming to terms with this and reading this, there was only two industries, basically. There was agriculture and animal husbandry. And God's like, okay, this is it. Like, do it. Subdue the land. Have dominion over the animals. So, when the habitats are filled, God makes humans and basically says, like, you got to get this. He basically says to humans, okay, you're in charge. You're in charge. Subdue. Have dominion. It's almost as if everything has been leading to this point. God creates the habitations, then he fills it with inhabitants, and then he puts someone in charge. He puts us right in the middle of it all and says, here. Okay, so what if we thought of it like this? A couple weeks ago, we used this analogy about Ford wanting to make a car. And for the life of me, I can't remember why, but we're going to use that same analogy again. Ford wants to make a car. And so the raw materials for that car, like the metals and are in the earth, right? In some form or another. And the synthetic material, like, I don't even know where that comes from, but there's the synthetic materials. And so someone has to mine the earth. And so they mine the earth and they extract the metals that are necessary. And then these metals, so there they are. But you don't have a car, right? Not yet. You got the potential for a car, but you don't have a car. You just have the raw materials. You have the makings of a car. And so the makings of these cars, it's like it's hammered and it's machined and it's shaped and it's laid out in some big factory in Michigan or somewhere on a production floor, all the parts. But you still don't have a car, do you? Like, you just have all the pieces of the car and they're all laying out. You have the makings of a car, but you don't have a car. And then the car rolls off the assembly line. Like, all the pieces have been fashioned and then all the pieces have been fit together and it's good. Sort of. Like, it came off the assembly line and it's in the production lot, but it's still missing something, isn't it? What's it missing? Okay, somebody at First Service got it right away. What's the car still missing? A driver. Thanks, whoever got that. The car's missing a driver. The car needs a driver. So here's something really peculiar, and I'm admitting it's peculiar, but it's fun to know. In the ancient Near Eastern mind, and remember, we've said this over and over, we are not translating words, we are translating worlds. In the ancient Near Eastern mind, the car doesn't even exist until it has a driver. Because if it doesn't have purpose or function, it doesn't exist yet. So that's the way they thought. We would think differently, I get it. But I want you to think like they think for a minute. The car lacks a driver. And so God creates the driver. God creates a driver in his image, and God puts us behind the wheel. He puts us behind, he gives us the wheel. He gives us the gas pedal. He gives us the brake. And even better, he gives us the keys, if you needed one. So God gives you both function and authority. You're the driver. You can drive. and you can have the authority to drive. So here's what we're going to find out in Genesis chapter 2. God puts us behind the wheel, like we're the driver. In Genesis chapter 2, we find out that God is riding along with us. He's not riding along with us as like our co-pilot. He's riding along with us like a driving instructor, teaching us how to drive. But we are all normal 16-year-olds with a permit. We all know how to drive. I don't need God to teach me how to drive. I know how to drive already. And so off we go, and what do? We wreck the car, hurt ourselves in the process, and God says what any dad would say, all right, out of the car. Or in this case, out of the garden. Now, the analogy breaks down after that, but you feel that, right? Like this is like the glory of it. God actually entrusting us with his car. Being in the image of God. Being in the image of God is about our purpose and our function in the creation. I know that a lot of times we think that the image of God is about like having a moral nature or a moral character, or being in the image of God is about the fact that we have a will or a mind or emotions and self-awareness and all those things that make humans uniquely unique. Humans are uniquely unique, but not because we're in the image of God. That's not what the image of God means. And the image of God, we say this a lot, and it's important that we get it right. The image of God isn't about our worth. Like we want to look at people and say everybody is of worth because they're in the image of God. Okay, they're in the image of God, but doesn't speak to their worth. Listen, your worth is about the fact that God loved you so much that Christ died for you. You were worth the death of his son, Jesus. That's your worth, which is infinite. Being in the image of God isn't about your worth. It's about your responsibility. The image of God is about responsibility. Now, again, in the ancient Near East, images were very common. Very common. They had no problem knowing what images were. They had two types of images. So they had images of the gods that were in the temples. So there were many gods and many temples, and every temple, if it was a real temple, had an image of its god. So they had that kind of image. And then the king, or the emperor, the ruler, he was, and it would have been a he always then, he was said to be the image of God. The emperor, the king, the president, if you will, was said to be an image of the God. And this was true even as late as the first century in the Roman Empire in New Testament times. The Caesar, the Roman emperor, was said to reign from heaven as an image of the God. So, the next time you're reading your New Testament and you come across a passage that says Jesus is the image of the invisible God, you should know that first century readers saw that and thought like, whoa, wait a minute. Caesar's the image of the invisible God. And the New Testament says, no. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. When the New Testament says Jesus is Lord. Other first century readers look at that and say, wait, Caesar's Lord. And the New Testament witnesses, no. Jesus is Lord. So up until people started to understand what God is saying in Genesis 1, they did not understand themselves as being in the image of God. Images were in temples. Images were kings. Like God had an image, but it's not us. And Genesis says, no, it is you. So this is how, again, in the ancient Near East, translating worlds, not words, the human function, the human purpose was not to be the image of God. It was to be a slave to the gods, to be a slave to the God's representative, the king, the emperor. Humans are slaves to images. And so I told you here already that all the people that surrounded the ancient Hebrews, they all had creation stories. And like these creation stories that they told, there were many parts of it that were very similar to the Genesis 1 account because they had the same kind of understanding of the world. So they were very similar, but then they were extremely different. So in the stories that they had heard, the creation of humans, and some of these stories came about through very violent means. Humans were created through one god killing another god and spilling this god's blood out, and there's just all kinds of very grotesque scenes in these ancient creation stories about how humanity was created. But almost in every instance, the reason humans were created was to serve the gods. Because gods get tired, you know? You probably didn't know, but gods get tired. And gods are lazy. Like, let's make some humans to do our work. Let's make some humans to feed the gods. Let's make some humans to service the gods. Let's make some humans to build the temples for us and to take care of the temples. And let's make some humans to be a slave to the image of God, which again is the emperor, the king. So these creation stories that were swirling around them of how humans were created and why served to perpetuate the social order that they were in. Elites and slaves, that's all there were. The emperor and his entourage, the elites, and then everybody else is a slave. And the stories that they told about creation served a purpose, to perpetuate that social order. And so, like, if you were to speak up and say, like, I don't want to be a slave. Why am I a slave? Their answer would be, well, of course you're a slave. Of course you're a slave to the king. Of course you're a slave to the temple. It's why you were created. Don't you know the story? And the Old Testament, Genesis 1 comes along and says, no, this is the story. This is the way that the story goes. See, they knew what images were. They didn't know what humans were. And Genesis 1 says, no, all humans, all of humanity, male and female as humanity, together were created as the image of God. And this is why the second commandment says, don't make any idols. Don't make any images. Like, one of the reasons why is because God said, because I made you. I already made images, representations of myself. Not wooden ones, not stone ones, not kings who lorded over others that Jesus is going to talk about later on. Living, breathing images, my representations. Don't make other ones. That's to degrade who you are. You see, this is like part of the history of humanity. Degrading who we really are. God's representatives in his creation, his images in his creation. That's That's who we are. Humans, this is your last fill-in. Humans were created with a royal function. A royal function. We were made to reign. All of us. Not just the elites, not just the kings, not just the people who seize power through violence. All of us were made to reign. So how are we doing? How are we doing? You know, in Revelation 22, like I'm just telling you over and over, the end is in the beginning. So we were all made to reign. So the vision of Revelation, I want to say, it technically ends. The vision itself technically ends with verse 5 in chapter 22. Now, there's a lot that follows verse 5, but it's not a part of the vision. It's a part of this is what you should do with the vision. But the vision, and remember what this is a vision is. It's a vision of the recreation. It's a vision of the new heavens and the new earth. And at the end of the vision, it says that the throne of God is in the middle of the city, and the Lamb will be in it, and his servants, that's us, his faithful followers, will worship him, and we'll see his face, and his name will be on our foreheads, and there's going to be no more night. Remember, I already talked about that. There'll be no more night. And, they will need no light of lamps or sun, for the Lord their God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. How about that? The end is in the beginning. You were created to reign, and when it's all said and done, the very last word, like honest, the very last word of the vision, the end of the story is that we will reign with him forever and ever. We were made to reign. So how are we doing? Well, I want to give you a little, sort of an assignment. So we're going to kind of answer that question next week. Not only the how we're doing, but how we can. Because obviously we're not doing well. I'm not doing well. And humanity as a whole isn't doing well with this creation enterprise assignment to reign as representatives of God. But it is what it means to be human. It is the meaning, purpose, function of our life. But there's a way back. There's a way back to that image. And you might guess the way back is through Jesus, who became the true human, like the true God, but also the true human, being the one who was fully the image of God, not just to show us who God was, but to show us what it means to be human after all. So what I'd like you to do is, in the bottom of your insert, there's scripture references to Matthew and Luke. And so Matthew and Luke, Jesus tells a parable. They're two different parables, but they're very similar. So he's different time, different place, different parable. But they're both about, so we minimize it a little bit when we talk about the parable of the talents. But now that you know what Genesis 1 is more about, if you read those parables, I think you'll see something more, perhaps, than you saw before. So if you get a chance, read those before next week.